Hello friends, my name is Olivia. I make videos about books on the internet, and today's video is just going to be my July wrap-up, sharing with you all the books that I read in the month of July. The first week of July I spent at the beach, and during that week I read 4 books because the beach is the best place to get a lot of reading done, and then I did not finish a single book after that. I actually started a new job in the month of July, so I had a lot of work to do with that and lots of other things going on. So I'm very grateful I had that week to actually get some reading done. I'm really excited to share these books with all of you though. I have 2 books in particular that I think might be on my list of favorites of the year, so I'm really excited to share all my feelings. So let's just jump in. The first book I read this month was The Anomaly by Rutger. I actually got this book through Book of the Month Club because my sister and brother-in-law got me a little 6-month subscription for my graduation, which I was so excited about. I've wanted to kind of be a Book of the Month member for a very long time, and I'm so hyped that I finally am. This book follows our main character, Nolan Moore, who kind of has an online web show where he kind of explores unexplained mysteries and anomalies and things like that, and for the most part he never really finds anything, but his show is very popular among like conspiracy theory kind of people. But he gets a new influx of cash by a new kind of sponsor, and so he gets to kind of explore this supposedly hidden cavern in the Grand Canyon wall, and then his crew actually ends up finding it, which is pretty surprising. And as they investigate this cavern, they realize that there is so much more to this mysterious place than they even knew about, and they get roped up into this really dangerous and intense mystery. I liked this book even so much more than I expected. I was expecting it to be exciting and fun, which it was. The author has a really great prose that makes the moments of tension or terror feel really intense and really appropriate. It is a bit like reading a movie, I think is a good way to put it, because it's just so exciting and kind of visual, and it is so easy to read, just like it's very easy to sit down and watch a movie. But there's actually even a lot more depth to it than I even expected. The main character, Nolan Moore, is able to share a lot of really cool information about history and archaeology in general, but also has some very interesting and unique perspectives on archaeology itself, on indigenous knowledge, on the ways that we explore things and the ways that we see things as worth being consumed and being explored. Just kind of philosophical monologues like that were peppered throughout this book, which I really enjoyed. And the actual mystery that is kind of unraveled is very exciting and very original, and totally had me on the edge of my seat and unsure what was going to happen all the way up to the very end. So it was just a really fun and exciting read. I kind of gave it between 3.5 and 4 stars. The next book I read in July was a bit of a letdown actually, and that was The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. I picked this up because I was at the beach, and reading thrillers and mysteries at the beach is always a lot of fun. I don't read a lot of thrillers and mysteries, and so I feel like when I do pick one up, I tend to compare it to the things I've already read, which are really excellent examples of that genre, like Gone Girl and like Agatha Christie. And I may have done that to this book a little bit, but even despite that comparison, I don't think it was a very good book. This book follows our main character, Lo, who is a travel journalist who gets the chance to cover a brand new cruise ship that has been created and is setting sail for the very first time. It's a very small and intimate cruise with only a few members on board, very much for the rich and famous, and she's very excited to have this opportunity as a journalist because it's her really first big gig and big job at her magazine. And while she's on the ship on the very first night though, she witnesses a woman being thrown overboard and murdered, a woman that she saw earlier in the day in the next cabin, and she tries to alert people on the boat and help kind of spur this investigation, but no one on the boat seems to know who this woman is or what Lo is even talking about, and so it's kind of all on Lo herself to try and figure out what happened and help this woman. This book has one of my favorite mystery tropes of all time, which is people all stuck in a place together, someone gets murdered, and we have to figure out who out of this very small group of people is the murderer. And despite having that really fantastic trope in this book, I feel like the author didn't capitalize on it very well at all. I think of that kind of trope with like Murder on the Orient Express, where everyone is a suspect, right? And our investigator is kind of uncovering mysteries and secrets about every single person. I never felt like the author was able to kind of cast any suspicion on anyone in general. None of the characters on the boat seemed very interesting or very suspicious. I didn't really have a moment where I was like trying to figure out the mystery myself. I felt like I was just kind of waiting for the author to eventually reveal to us, when they decided they wanted to, what actually happened. The actual main twist of this book was a little bit surprising. I didn't really see it coming, but once that main twist happened, I could predict everything that was going to happen, and I'm not usually good at predicting endings of books, so if I can predict it, it means that your book was not very good at throwing off suspicion or kind of creating twists. And as well, even in the beginning of the book, it was very obvious when the author is trying to kind of create red herrings and make you think something was happening when really it was something else. but it was very obvious when the author was doing that, so I never really fell for those kinds of tricks or those kinds of attempts to make us be surprised or be shocked. I ended up just giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in July and ended up absolutely loving was The Virgin Suicides by Eugenides. This book follows 5 sisters who live in a very sheltered home who within 1 year all commit suicide, and it's told in this very, very unique narration where the perspective of the novel comes from a group of men, of boys, who knew these girls when they were younger, who were in the neighborhood with them and kind of developed this kind of fascination and obsession with these 5 girls, and now, however many years later, are attempting to kind of investigate or relearn about these girls and track what happened that summer, what happened in that year, and what led them to commit suicide. But the narration itself is still a bit distant. As the book goes on, it's very clear that these 5 sisters aren't actually the main character, aren't actually the main point. Their story and their suicides are used to demonstrate kind of a larger point about the boys themselves, about these boys who were obsessed with them and enamored with them across this year period during that summer when they all committed suicide. And by using the boys and their narration in that way, this really interesting and beautiful and poignant message about like adolescence is made. I think Eugenides really perfectly captures the melodrama of being a young person, the way that we can often project upon other people, the way that we can make ourselves feel very self-important and read deeply into the kind of mundane interactions that we have in our lives. And I thought it was such a beautiful way that that was done with this incredibly unique and dark plot as well. The writing style is completely just dreamy, I think is the perfect way to put it. It is so beautiful and rich and really is able to kind of make simple moments like a summer night or a suburban street feel so magical and powerful and impactful, which I absolutely loved. Needless to say, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read in July, another 5 out of 5 star read, is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This book follows a group of actors and musicians 20 years after a huge flu epidemic hit Earth and basically decimated the entire population. And throughout those 20 years, these actors and musicians have all come together to kind of create their own acting troupe, and they travel around a specific part of the United States, performing and trying to keep Shakespeare and art alive. But through their travels, they end up encountering this prophet, this kind of doomsday prophet who sees himself as the herald and the messenger of God, who has kind of created his own cult, and it's clearly very dangerous and is beginning to threaten everything that this kind of troupe and all the communities along this area of the United States have created for themselves in the aftermath of this tragedy. I would say actually though, only about a third to a half of this book is actually about that main plot. A lot of it jumps back in time, specifically to follow the life of this actor. The very first chapter of this book details a performance of King Lear, where the actor who plays King Lear has a heart attack and dies that night, and that is the same night that the flu epidemic hits the United States, and one of the little actresses in that play ends up being in this Shakespeare troupe 20 years later. So it jumps back in time from that Shakespeare troupe to this kind of actor to detail his life and the people that he's impacted, and just lots of other kind of stories of different characters are all kind of brought together and woven together in this really stunning way. My favorite thing about books, period, my favorite thing that books can do is exactly what this book did. The way that Emily St. John Mandel was able to bring all these disparate stories together and create this amazing message about kind of unity and oneness and the ways that we impact and affect each other's lives without even realizing it, almost like a butterfly effect sort of thing, was so, so beautiful. One of my favorite things about this book, though, that I'm obsessed with, is the way that it handled the flu epidemic. I like dystopian post-apocalyptic novels, but my issue with them always is I have a gripe with how they portray how humanity would actually react in the face of such tragedies. I feel like those movies and those books are always like, people just decide to rape and murder nonstop, everyone becomes a rapist and a murderer, and the world falls into chaos and violence until the end of its time. And while I do think the world would be quite dangerous after flu epidemic, this book strays away from that and portrays what I think is more accurate. It's just people coming together and forming communities in ways that feel natural, in the ways that we have for all of human history, and finding ways to work together to survive and kind of create a new world in the face of disaster. And despite being a book about a flu epidemic and about a crazy cult-leading prophet, this book just made me feel so in awe of the world. It made me feel so aware of how beautiful the world is and how beautiful life is and how much potential people have for love and community and beauty. It made me so emotional in a very positive way that I never would have expected. Just everything about this book, the way that people connected, the story even about the prophet himself and the fear of it and the violence of it, the story about people trying to keep Shakespeare alive 20 years after the world has essentially ended. It was just so beautiful. I'm obsessed with it. The more I talk about it right now, the more I realize how much I just love this book and want to force every single person that I know to read it. I know I'm a bit late to the game because this is a very popular book for a long time, but man. So those are the 4 books that I read in the month of July. I have no idea what August holds in terms of reading because I have quite a lot of stuff to do in August. It's kind of a frighteningly busy month, but hopefully I can get a few reads in that month as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have any thoughts on any of these books, I would love to hear them as always, and I'll talk to you soon with another video soon.